From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. A young woman struggled with depression with no apparent cause. Her partner had heart issues. Together, they regained their health through conventional and unconventional methods. This is episode 417, and we feature a couple today who has overcome numerous obstacles to attain the robust health that characterizes their lives today. They share their story from Puerto Rico. Anette tells of her bouts of depression and what helped her heal. And Alberto talks about the emotional burden of being a caregiver, as well as his own heart condition. Together, they offer a perspective that helps us understand where physical, mental, and emotional health intersect. They also offer tips for how to detox our own lives with tools that they've used along the way. Our guests are Anette Ruiz and Alberto Medina, the new podcast hosts of our sister show in Spanish, Tradiciones Sabias. Anette is a communications specialist, an independent journalist, and a researcher. And Alberto is certified in permaculture design and was a radio program contributor for 10 years to a show about alternative news and information in Puerto Rico. Today, they open their hearts to share with us their story of what has been for them the most difficult and challenging experiences they have lived through, which provided them with tools and knowledge that can give hope to others. And they also remind us that vibrant health is both our birthright and our own responsibility. Before we dive in, yes, the Weston A. Price Foundation has pamphlets, an IG account, and podcasts in Espanol. The Instagram account is at WestonAPrice_Espanol. And the podcast is called Tradiciones Sabias. Its new hosts are Anette and Alberto, and you will hear from them soon. And they will be rolling with episodes every 2 weeks. Go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the button that says WAPF in Espanol for all of the resources. And a shout out to Earth Runners. Free your feet and rewild your soul. Earth Runners offers sandals especially designed that allow you to restore your natural connection with the earth. Their sandals have a minimalist sole and a copper earthing plug and conductive laces that keep you grounded to the earth. Earth Runners is an ancestral-inspired sandal company which has created these minimalist earthing sandals to support a more barefoot experience, both physically and electrically, so you can live more like our ancestors did, connected to the earth. Go to earthrunners.com and use the code WISE23 for 10% off your purchase. That's earthrunners.com and the code WISE23. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Anette and Alberto.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here.
Hi, Hilda. It's truly an honor to be with you here.
I met you some years ago at Polyface Farm, I think with Joel, and we started talking, and I immediately felt this heart connection because you all are in the same effort that the Weston A. Price Foundation is all about. It's like lifting up health and wellness. And for you all, your point of departure into this field was your own health journey. So Anette, I want you to tell folks about that kind of cloud of depression that came over you in 2016.
Yes, in 2016, I started feeling like overwhelmed with day-to-day tasks and basic things. Like, for example, I could not concentrate as I used to at work. I was working full-time as a communications officer at a foundation in Puerto Rico. And I used to be very sharp and do a lot of different things. And I started feel like that cloud. It was like the mental focus. It was being shady. It was affected. Then also like my ability to concentrate, to remember things and memorize. And also like my intellectual capacity. I felt it was diminishing. So it started more like what traditionally is seen as just a mental health problem. At that moment, that was the first episode that I encountered of depression. It was clinically diagnosed by a psychologist.
And how long did it last, and what did you do to address it?
That episode didn't last long. It was just a few months, and it was considered like mild depression. So it was not that intense. And Alberto, at that moment, since we didn't know what was happening to me really, people who were familiar to us, specifically a friend of mine, my best friend, she used to work at a clinical center in Puerto Rico that offer psychological services, nutrition therapy, and also yoga services. So at that point, we used psychotherapy and also individual yoga, like one-on-one sessions. It also helped me a lot. And it was just a few months. I also took time off work. That was the way I could face it. That was mild, as I mentioned, and that was the way that we approached that first episode. It was the first one.
That's right, because you had 4 in total, right?
Yes. In total, there were 4 episodes in a 4-year span. So it's 1 episode per year in between months of recovery and being okay and kind of myself again. And then the second episode, the third, and the fourth. Every episode was more intense than the previous one. So it went from the first in 2016 being mild, basically having more like a minor functional impairment. But then the second episode was in 2017 and it was moderate. I didn't sleep for many days. And that episode, we had to go to a psychiatric doctor, which is different from the psychological approach. Then the third one was more severe. And the fourth one, which was in 2009, that was the worst of all. At that point, I felt totally numb. I didn't feel any of the desires for life or for everything that I used to do. And before all these episodes, I was a healthy person. In overall, I had healthy relationships. I was very involved socially. I had a good childhood, everything. That was in 2009, the last one. So it went from a mild one to a very severe one. 2019, sorry, I had to mention it's 2019. I said 2009. It's 2016, 17, 18, and 19. Those were the 4 years.
And Alberto, in the meantime, how were you feeling? You must have been scratching your head like, what's going on? This, like you said, this woman came from a healthy family. She was happy. She was smart. She was bright. And suddenly she was being weighed down by these bouts of depression.
Yeah, I refer to it as an invisible enemy. I had no idea how a person experiencing depression looks like or how a person like that behaves. So at first, we didn't understand what was going on. So I have always been very active on doing my own research. At that moment, I started looking for information in that regard, trying to understand what to do. It was very difficult because I must tell that for me, the most important thing every day is to make my wife smile. And when that didn't happen, I knew that something really, really serious was going on with her.
And what else was happening during that time that might have also affected your relationship and how you were perceiving what was going on? I guess I'm thinking about Hurricane Maria. When did that hit? And how did that affect you too?
I will go a little further in time to explain you this. She was experiencing what is known, now we know that, as pyroluria, among other things. And pyroluria is a condition that don't let your body cope with stress. So now that you mentioned the hurricane was a very big stress event. But before that, in 2016, she suffered an injury. She fell on her back. So we observed that there was a pattern that when some stressful event happened, she would handle it. But then 2 or 3 months after that, then the depression event were manifesting in her body.
And so he mentioned Hurricane Maria, which was the worst disaster, well, natural disaster or event in our history, in our lives. It was like a category 4 or 5. It was huge. Mm-hmm. We were without electricity, without basic services for some places for even a year. So that was very hard. And it was like Alberto mentioned, like the trigger. So we had one of the triggers, that backfall, and then the first episode. Hurricane Maria, I handled it perfectly. Everything went well, but the stress level was too high. And then the second episode. The other thing that happened was that Alberto had a heart condition that we can explain later, but also we thought he was going to die literally. And it was a very, very hard moment for us. We even said farewell. We thought it was our last time for him in this life. So that was another huge trigger. And among other things, but I would mention those three like events, like the stressors that since the pyrrole disorder that pyroluria that Alberto mentioned was like I could handle them, but then my body, my mind, everything was like that was the top. So I was always then in like a fight, flight, or freeze mode, but then into the collapse. I just collapsed, basically.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about that book called The Body Keeps the Score. And the idea is, even though you managed, your body knew, and there was fallout down the line, that you couldn't handle that stress. And that led to the condition of depression and it becoming more and more intense over the years. So I know you guys are really like kind of natural folks now and into the alternative health approaches. What treatments did you first attempt that maybe didn't work? You mentioned, seeing a psychiatrist and going to psychotherapy and doing yoga and stuff. And then what did you do later that did help lift the cloud? Or was it a combination of all the things?
Well, as part of my research efforts, I found out about orthomolecular medicine, which looks to correct the nutritional balance in the body. And I started reading a really great book by a man called William Walsh. The book is called Nutrient Power. And that book explains to you how the imbalances in nutrients in your body may trigger those symptoms, because depression is a symptom. We have been taught that depression, anxiety, ADHD, etc. are conditions, but in fact, they are symptoms of a root cause. So when I started doing my research and I found about Dr. William Walsh and that amazing book called Nutrient Power, I started to understand how nutrients play a critical role in your body and how an imbalance of nutrients, may it be a lack of a certain nutrient or an excess of a certain nutrient, may trigger that in your body and symptoms would manifest. For example, a person that may express depression symptom may have a different imbalance than another person experiencing the same symptoms. And that's how we learned that the official psychiatry treatment was not dealing with the root cause. So as part of that research, I then found out about a clinic in Illinois, in Chicago, run by Drs. Albert Mensa and Dr. Judith Bauman. They were students of Dr. William Walsh, the one that I mentioned before. And they started their clinic treating patients, but going to the root cause. And they use very specific lab tests to address that.
And in my case, what we discovered is that I had a lack of zinc and excess of copper among the pyrrole or pyroluria disorder. So those three combine, which we will get into a minute about what happened in my body before that to get to that point, of course. But that was the root cause for the expression that manifested in that mental fog that I had, the lack of initiative or the lack of feeling the way I used to, both mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually, because we know we are multidimensional beings. So what is called mental health is isolated from physical health in the conventional way of thinking, but it's really all tied together and interconnected. So in my case, that multidimensional approach to treating and understanding the root cause that was that chemical or whatever nutritional imbalance that led to a biochemical imbalance that led to imbalance overall, okay? So it's like a pattern that Alberto just mentioned. Also, I found out about holistic psychiatric doctor in Puerto Rico, which also helped in a moment because at some point I used drugs, but then I also had to understand how to get away of those so my body could process everything in a way that is healthy. Of course, this is not a straitjacket, and this is my case and my journey, which is a very specific example, but everyone can be different, of course. Then we also found out about functional medicine, which also looks at like 5 or 6 areas of your life: body movement, exercising, sleep hygiene, your nutrients, or what do you eat, your eating habits, and many other things. So that doctor also in Puerto Rico helped us through this journey. I also got back to basic things that I used to love. And because being in this rat race on what the society and what you believe it's success, I was focused on working on that full-time job and, being focused on working and then doing house chores. And I went away of basic things that I used to love and I'm passionate about, like dancing. So I got back to those like hobbies and writing. I used to write every day, and now I keep track of my journals and everything. But there was like a period of my life that I did not connect to those. So getting back to the point about the root cause, Alberto found about that clinic, and one part of it was that imbalance. But when we look deeper, and now after it's been a 7-year journey, after so many years, so many information that we were looking, so many specialists, not only doctors, but also other people treating ourselves more holistically, we understand that deeply root cause of everything in my case was my birth was a premature birth. My mom had an emergency C-section, so I didn't went through the birth canal, and I didn't got all that microorganisms or all that stuff that is so important, and that the science has proved now how important it is for your microbiome and the gut flora, even 3, 4, and 5 decades later, like what happened with me. I was not breastfed, which is also important because through the mom's nipples, we received a lot of microorganisms too. And I was 1 month in NICU, the Neo-Intensive Care Unit, receiving antibiotics, vaccines, and many other things that we don't even know. And away from the skin-to-skin contact that today we know how important it is with my mom and my dad. So all of that combined, my childhood, I had asthma, I was very anxious kid, and during my teenage years, anxiety was part of my daily life, but we didn't know exactly why. Now we understand all of that was connected. And then what exacerbated, or like we say, the drop that make everything fall out apart, was the contraceptive pills that I used for 5 years. And they were prescribed by my doctor. And at that moment, I didn't do any further research like we usually do, that we research for things that are out of mainstream. But at that point, I was just focused on having these pills. And then when I stopped taking them, exactly a year after that I had that backfall, the first symptoms started.
I'm so glad you stopped to reflect about how your life began, digging deep to see these root causes. And then you were also able to see other little moments that contributed to who you were and patterns that can be changed. I love that you returned to your hobby of dancing, and all these things are modalities that help lift the body, mind, spirit, and soul, as you were saying. Coming up, Alberto tells the story of his heart condition and why he and Anette thought it was going to cost him his life. And they share together the many natural health practices that they have incorporated for vibrant health, including grounding and plenty of sunshine.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Paleo Valley. Paleo Valley now has new pasture-raised pork sticks that make healthy snacking on clean, high-quality protein easy and delicious. Paleo Valley pasture-raised pork sticks are sourced from pigs that spend their lives on pasture on U.S. farms, foraging and exercising as they please. They are never confined, and they love to eat grass, turnips, squash, apples, and more. So they've lived a good life. And Paleo Valley naturally ferments their pork sticks to preserve them without the use of citric acid, GMOs, or seed oils, so we can live a good life too. Order yours today. Go to paleovalley.com and use the code WISE for 15% off. That's paleovalley.com and the code word WISE. And a shout out to Optimal Carnivore. Brain Nourish is their latest product. It is the ultimate whole food, nootropic supplement to build a better brain. They have combined grass-fed beef brain and lion's mane powder in a groundbreaking formula. These two ancestral superfoods have been used for centuries as a nootropic to improve brain function and overall mental well-being. Each serving has 1,500 milligrams of organic lion's mane mushroom extract and 1,500 milligrams of beef brain. They only use 100% real mushrooms, organic fruiting bodies, which are rigorously tested for active compounds. The beef brain is sourced from the highest quality regenerative farms in New Zealand. Go to amazon.com/optimalcarnivore to see all of their products and use the code WESTON10 to get 10% off your purchase. That's amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code WESTON10. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Now I want to talk with Alberto about the root causes for his heart condition and hear just a little bit more about that.
Well, in my case, I didn't know about that until the event, but I was experiencing what is called supraventricular tachycardia, which is like a sort of a disorder in your heart where some of the electrical tissue forms a short circuit sometimes, so your heart rate starts rising. During my whole life, every event will be like 1 minute long and then it will stop. At this moment in 2018, it was an hour long. My heart rate was over 220 pulses per minute. When the highest you should get your heart, like in a fight or an accident, is 180. So I was way over the limit. We were in the hospital. I almost died. Thankfully, it was corrected, what is known as an ablation treatment. But it was very traumatic because I got to see death eye to eye. And like Annette told you, we even say goodbye to each other. But thankfully, here I am.
Oh my goodness. Were you at the time when your heart started racing and all that, when this episode happened, were you a caregiver to Annette? And was that an added stress that may have affected this heart situation?
I am glad you brought that point because now when I look back, the role of the caregiver sometimes is a very heavy load over your shoulders since you're having a life in your hands and your decisions may be the difference between life and death for that loved one. I am pretty sure that amount of stress through all those events exacerbated that condition in my body, which I also see as a blessing because my body was able to handle that according to the doctors because I am in good shape. I am very active in my work. I work as a gardener every day and also I play sports. But if that should happen to me when I was older, maybe my body could not handle that. So all this interconnection of events may be a blessing in disguise that happened to me at the right moment. And I had that experience at the right moment. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. And I get the sense that, Annette, you see the trials and tribulations you've been through a similar lens, that you see it as an opportunity for your growth.
Definitely. We have always, since we started dating, one of the key factors of being able to build our relationship is that we were very aligned in basic life values, including seeing life as a great teacher and as a school. We see ourselves as constant learners and we are always in gratitude, no matter what happens. And this is something that we were already like that before the 4 episodes that we went through with me and with his heart condition. But this took like another level. Our lives are not the same. People say in Puerto Rico, we are all before and after the hurricane because it changed everything and it puts yourself in a position to rethink your life. But in our case, aside from the hurricane, which we also experienced, we see ourselves in a different direction, completely changed. In my case, I see myself being reborn. And using the analogy of my birth and that trauma that we didn't even know that had all those repercussions and all those effects in my physical body, in my mental health, my emotional and spiritual path and health. I see myself, I am a different person, although I had many of the same feelings, passions, and values that I have today. I do feel lighter and healthier and more in peace with life, and more, very important, very present in the day-to-day, like fully alive now, which is what is important. And I used to live a lot, not in the past, which is another thing that a lot of people tend to go back, but not to recharge or to learn from our ancestors of their wisdom or something, but just to think about things they should have done different. No, I was always in the future, which is another way of life, like looking to what would happen and very anxious. Now, after this experience, I feel I have been carrying a lot of baggages that I am now free of them.
You talked about how most people in Puerto Rico measure time by the hurricane, before and after, and that also there's a parallel in your own life before you got into the health and wellness idea that you could take on some new modalities that would help you reach optimal health. I want to ask both of you to share just some of your happy habits that have led to the place where you are now, just living vibrant, fulfilled, healthy lives.
Well, most of our habits, we have been practicing them since 15 years ago when we started our relationship. So one of them will be no use of microwave at all for our food. Another thing that we started doing right away was we wanted to understand what was in our food. So we wanted to understand what was in those labels, all those very complicated names. So we bought a great book that has every single additive and preservative in the food industry. So every time we went to the supermarket, we were in a very active researching program, let's say. And every item we would grab from the shelf that we were interested in, we would look in the book. Let's say, what is nitrates? What is aspartame? What is MSG? What is Gero number 5? Most of them were toxic. So our grocery list started changing, and we remained only buying fruits, vegetables, meat, some dairy, and some grains. That's it. Another good habit that we apply daily is doing grounding. We try to walk barefoot on the grass. Very early in the morning, we try to look at the sun, not directly, but at the sunrise. So those, I think, are most of the important things we have been applying.
That's beautiful. What about you, Annette?
I want to add the non-toxic components, not only of food, but also in skincare products and makeup products or anything that you put in your body. And in my case, that was a journey also to learn that. And we started that even before my episode. So we have been, like Alberto mentioned, more than 15 years doing all of these changes, specifically with the skin products and also with cleaning products or anything, moving into more natural elements and things that are not toxic to our body. We can receive toxicity from the air, from the soil, from the water sources. So filtration systems and all that stuff is very important. Non-toxic thoughts and non-toxic relationships are also key habits.
And another thing we started doing, now we have our own chicken flock. So we have our own eggs, and also we have our own garden, and we've been working very hard on expanding it so we can grow at least part of the food we consume, and we know what we put on it. We are applying permaculture practices on our garden. So I think that's very important for people listening to us to try the best they can to grow some of their food, because that's the only way you can be sure of what you're putting in your body, which is the building blocks for your health and your well-being.
Absolutely. And I love that you two have put so much into learning. As a matter of fact, your little tagline is Eternos Estudiantes, like eternal students. what would you say to a person who's like, oh, that's too much work. I don't want to bother reading all those labels or finding all the toxicity. As a matter of fact, it'll probably just induce fear in me. What would you tell someone that doesn't have that bent, that doesn't maybe want to do a deep dive in some of these subjects to improve their health?
Well, I would go back to what you mentioned of being, that's your birthright, and it's also your responsibility. So it's like a two-sided coin. Nobody else is responsible of my well-being or my health rather than myself. And sometimes we delegate that in our partners, initially in our parents, but then we grow up and then it's your partner, then it's the doctors, the people who have whatever certifications and everyone else. But it's my responsibility. So I would say you should do it because it's your right, but it's also your responsibility to take over your health, your happiness. It's only you. And when you understand that, it gives you a totally different approach of seeing life and obviously focusing on those dimensions that we mentioned earlier, not focusing only on the physical components. So the daily habits include being physically active and being mentally active, emotionally aware and intelligent emotionally, spiritually, all those layers and multi-dimensions that we mentioned earlier, because we're holistic beings.
I think there is a neuroplasticity action that must happen on our brains because most of us are product of a very poor education system, which doesn't encourage children to be curious and to be wanting to learn. So I would say to someone that doesn't feel any interest in learning, try to look at least for some very little thing that you would like to understand. Maybe what you're eating, maybe how something in nature works, plants, animals, whatever. And maybe one of those things could be a trigger to your curiousness to continue that learning path. Because it's a skill to learn. It's a skill to do your own research. And it's part of our nature to be curious. But that has been very damaged by that, what I call indoctrination system in schools. So at first, it may be a very difficult task for someone that is not used to read. But once you start doing that, you will see it will be easier and your interest will keep growing.
Yes, we all have curiosity, but it's been tamped down. So to kind of re-plug into that, even if you're just curious, I wonder how that football player got that name. So you kind of look it up and you try to find out more about him and, oh, he was born in Nigeria or whatever it is. I don't know if there are any Nigerian football players, but the idea is you're curious about something. Why not see what you could be curious about related to your health or food? Like, I wonder why I'm so tired every day. That's a great beginning question to ask, right? So we are on the same path in that we here at the foundation, we're curious about alternative ways to provide healing for ourselves and for others. That's why you guys are on here. We were curious what you had to say because you are taking the lead. You were going to be taking the baton for the Tradiciones Sabias Spanish sister podcast that we have. So we're very excited about that. And we're also excited for what you brought today. I want to wrap up now with the question I love to pose at the end of every episode in English. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do? Annette, we'll start with you.
Okay, so my one recommendation would be to focus on yourself in all those multi-dimensions that we mentioned. We are physical beings, we are mental beings, we have emotions, we have energetic levels and spiritual levels. So focus on those dimensions, combining ancient traditional wisdom, like the name wisdom, I love it, and also what we have learned thanks to science and all the technology that we have today. Keep constantly learning and focusing on applying healthy habits to all those dimensions because they are all interconnected, and that's the way to live a happy and healthy life.
I would say that the most important thing that has worked for me is to look life with an eternal gratitude. When you look life with an eternal gratitude, you see everything as a blessing. You see everything as a gain. And when you look life like that, you will feel taken care of by nature or by God or by the universe. When you see life like that, your health will improve. There will be another option. Your health will improve because when you are in gratitude, all your cells, all your being will start to work in synchrony with nature. And nature is perfect. So that's what I would say.
So beautiful. Well, I am grateful for you too. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for leading the charge with Tradiciones Sabias, the sister show. We are very excited to see where your journey of curiosity and being eternal students takes you. So thank you once again, my friends.
Thank you, Hilda.
Thank you, Hilda. Big hugs.
Our guests today were Anette Ruiz and Alberto Medina. Check out their Instagram account at amar.eternosestudiantes, amar.eternosestudiantes, and listen to Wise Traditions in Spanish, the show called Tradiciones Sabias, and share it with your Spanish-speaking friends. I'm Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast for the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent podcast review from Apple Podcasts. Amazing truth. I love this, as it is very hard to get access to this information in a culture that purposely hides these things. These truths aren't just our past traditions. They are the way mankind has survived for so long. I just want to shout this podcast to the rooftops and share with everyone because of how much I have learned in just a couple episodes. Micaiah, thank you so much for this review. You too can leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. Just click on the app, click on ratings and reviews, give us as many stars as you like, and tell the world why you like the show. It is very much like shouting it from the rooftops. And thank you in advance. And thank you for listening. Stay well, my friend, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.